Welcome to the Best Music Podcast, where we see behind the curtain and discover the hidden habits and success secrets of noteworthy music makers so you, the listener or viewer, can speed up your journey to your dream music goals by taking what you need from the wins, losses, insight, and understanding and lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Dan Spencer, and this week's featured guest is Bob Halligan Jr.
Well, tonight she's gonna dance, tonight she's gonna sing. Little mama's gonna shake it, gotta get you back into the swing. Let's get jiggerous, tick-tock and jumping into the swirling, flowing love light. That's all around us. Jiggerous, get living dangerous, 'cause there's only so much more daylight. And today you'll have to cheat it away. And tonight,
Bob Halligan Jr. has written over 1,100 songs, 200 of which have been recorded by artists internationally, with sales over 30 million units. Cher, Kiss, Michael Bolton, Judas Priest, Kathy Mattea, Rebecca St. James, and many others have helped put 9 gold and platinum records on Halligan's wall, as you can see, including the hit song Don't Close Your Eyes by KIX. Bob has sung on recordings with Billy Joel, Joan Jett, Felix, Cavaliere, and Michael McDonald, and was nominated as a songwriter for Cable Ace Award for Original Song of the Year. He was an adjunct professor at Syracuse University for 12 years, where he taught songwriting, film scoring, music business, and a Beatles class. He has composed and performed scores for 4 silent films at the Julien Dubuque International Film Festival. In 2017, he was given the Distinguished Alumni Award by Christian Brothers Academy. Mr. Halligan has recently been invited as the only American to sing at a papal gathering of 100,000 people in Italy and actually met Pope Francis. Now, Bob is the leader, singer, and songwriter of the band Kaylee Rain, a Celtic pop rock group that has been together for over 28 years. Kaylee Rain has played some of the top venues in the country, including Reliant Stadium, the RCA Dome, and the Georgia Dome. They have played many festivals, from Kingdom Bound to Creation Fest to World Youth Day. They have been invited to perform at numerous Celtic and community events, from the Slanty Festival at the Bethlehem Music Fest and Irish Fest in Syracuse, New York, Cheyenne, Wyoming, and many more. They played at major conferences, including the NCYC and Youth Specialties, and have even performed at major corporations like Nextel. Billboard magazine says, "These guys deserve to be heard by the entire world. Their potential is limitless because they have an appeal that knows no boundaries. Kaylee Rain makes music your feet want to dance and your soul soar." Kaylee Rain's 9th studio album, Crash This Gate, is out now on all streaming platforms and available for sale at concerts and mail order. This is the first new material from the group in 9 years. So go ahead and check out the video description if you're on YouTube, or the show notes if you're on audio, for links to this brand new motivational music. You can check out more at KayleeRain.com. That's CEILIRAIN.com, and Facebook.com/CEILIRAIN. Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with me and for your patience while I read through your many accolades.
Dan, now I have to live up to some sense of that incredible buildup. I really appreciate you rattling it all off so beautifully. Your diction is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you, Bob. What a nice thing for you to say. I think the wall of gold and platinum records behind you sort of back up everything I just said, but very cool.
Well, I may have rented it.
You know what?
Don't know.
It might all be chocolate. We don't know. It could all be chocolate.
Would that it were.
Would that it were. We would have so much chocolate to eat. Well,
yeah.
Bob, you're clearly ridiculously versatile, and you could dedicate your life and time to any genre and any music culture. Why Celtic music?
Well, once upon a time, about 30 years ago, my wife was playing Irish music around the house, the chieftains, things like that. And I really fell in love with it, too. And at a certain point, she said, "Why don't you combine your newfound love of Celtic music with your rock and roll that you've always done?" And I said, "Honey, that's easily the dumbest idea I ever heard." I thought we can kill what remains of my career by following that notion. And in fact, career be darned. And to the side here, Kaylee Rain is the thing that I want on my tombstone. Not that I'm in a hurry to die, but you know what I mean? It's like I'm glad I wrote for Kiss, and I'm glad I can play Paul McCartney in a Beatlemania group, which I enjoy doing and did a couple of nights ago. But I want to be known as the guy from Kaylee Rain, because that's kind of the essence of who I am and who I've aspired to be, let's say.
The crowning achievement, the crowning purpose. What about being in Kaylee Rain do you find to bring you so much meaning and purpose? Well,
I had, for the first Kaylee Rain album, I had 44 years to write the songs. It works that way on your first album, right? Or your first for Kaylee. And, but, it really summed up a sort of a personal mission statement, the group. I realized along the way that I needed or chose to combine the Chuck Berry rock and roll energy with the Beatley sort of pop sensibilities with the Chieftains and other groups, Irish yearning and longing, and there's negatory in the Irish. There's so many emigres, there's so much angst and it's such a combo of the joy and the pains of life, and the name Kaylee Rain. Kaylee is a Gaelic word, an Irish word for a party, like think of a wedding reception, sort of all ages party with music. But Caeli, the Latin word, means of heaven, like celestial. So those two combined with rain, and it's meant to be a downpour of heavenly partiness. And so there's a spiritual element, not religious, but spiritual element to the lyric, and an uplifting message, and a vibrant sort of pop rock / Celtic musical element. And I don't know, it just kind of is me. And it's been such a blessing to get to do it all this time.
Isn't it incredible how sometimes the most meaningful things that we find in our lives are ideas that come out of other people's mouths?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't want to give any more credit to everybody else than I have to, but yeah, jeepers.
Yeah.
So, like, I do like to say that my wife Linda has had some of my best ideas. In other words, we steal from what we love and what is best, and if we're smart,
Wow. So let's turn to songwriting. So, what do you do to complete a song when inspiration delivers only part of the song?
Yeah. Well, I always told my students I don't have a baseball cap handy, but imagine that I do. And you start with the cap on backwards. Okay, like a crazy kid, anything can happen, right? And you just follow that, and you just, pardon the idea here, you just puke out whatever is available to you in that moment. Okay, but let's put, then the next day, or when the drugs wear off, or whatever it is, you put the cap on forwards, and you say, yes, well, let's evaluate. And you go into edit mode, and they say that writing is rewriting. And at that point, you have to realize that the good parts, the crappy parts, have to be as good as the good parts. So a song isn't finished until the level of everything has equaled out, and you can't have a lousy bridge. And a proper songwriter who has the creative ambition that I recommend one should have will have, you can't see me with my stomach, so pretend this is down here. My stomach is churning until I've got it right. And that's really the deal. So, and a lot of times, Dan, we have to take a step or a giant step or many giant steps back and say, and let a few hours go by, or a day or two or a month or a year or whatever it is, for some objectivity. Because when the hat is on forward, we're in editing and evaluating mode. And, your name is going to go on this. So that initial burst of enthusiasm is fantastic and to be honored. You want to capture via video or your phone's whatever they call it,
voice
thingy
memo.
that we used to use. We used to use. So, you really have to think like you're a professional, like people are gonna have the red pen out and mark you up if you get it wrong, as Paul McCartney would say. So it's a process, and that initial burst is key, but the editing and the bringing it to the finish line, without that, you're in trouble.
A fair summary, would you agree a fair summary is let the inspiration happen first, and you have your way with the inspiration, and the inspiration has its way with you, and then...
Perfect.
Then you bring the tools to bear. Then the craft.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. You're the man. You have it exactly right.
Well, I think you're the man, and it's with respect, Bob. You're the man.
I'm the man with the woman's hair, but hey.
I literally have no response to that. On a very rare occasion, I had nothing to say. You stumped
funny.
me, Bob. You stumped me.
Well.
What's your internal process like? Once you've turned the baseball cap around and it's time to bring the tools to bear, do you have any processes like, listing out all the tangential related subjects to something so you have plenty of fodder to go through, or are you just sort of going through that intellectually? What sort of processes do you have?
Wow, that's a great question. There are loads of them, and some of them are ill-defined. Some of them are really just back to that working until the stomach settles idea. There's an authenticity meter that has to be pegging. In other words, if it sounds like I'm just trying to get a rhyme, or if it sounds like my chords are everything everybody's heard a million times already, or if it feels like the song hasn't earned its keep yet, by which I mean, once upon a time, John Mellencamp was quoted as saying, "The world doesn't need another song." And I took that, Dan, to mean the world doesn't need a song that doesn't, pay its way, that isn't needed in some way. And a lot of the stuff that the world needs, it doesn't know it needs that. So the creative process is digging around. It's like is it dogs who look for truffles in the woods?
I think it's owls, but yeah, either way,
Yeah,
we're picking we are picking out on metaphors here, and we'll find our way eventually.
Yeah, we're looking for those truffles, and they're often found in the unlikeliest of places. And but you're looking for a message, a point of view, an angle that's never quite been used before. And the country writers are, of course, great at that because they start sort of lyric first and work the tune as they go. But they really start from an idea. And I've done that many times, not exclusively or mainly for country songs, but sometimes the idea is what makes the song earn its way into people's ears.
Can you talk about, let's isolate, because it's so vast, right? We have lyrics, we have melody, we have harmony, and then within melody, we could segment that into the rhythm of the melody and then also the notes of the melody.
Good for you.
Can we talk specifically about lyrics and your internal process? Let's take the example of going idea first, concept first. What sort of tips or tricks, or how does it work inside of you? Because I'm sure after all this experience, like when people first start out, like maybe you need to write out lists of things that are related. But for someone like yourself who's been doing it for so long, that might be more automatic. So can you maybe walk us through the sort of brief seconds that you run through these processes, what that's like?
Yeah. I'll say, Dan, that your idea of making lists is great. And whether I do it or I don't, is immaterial. It's just a great idea because you're trying to, in the vernacular, in the way that people speak with your lyrics, super important. It's got to sound like English. And you've got to sing it like English, because if you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, then you're cooked. It makes no sense to your listener. And the important thing about lyrics and a pop song is that we hear it in real time. We receive it in real time. Unlike a poem, which we can reread to our heart's content multiple times. If I'm listening to WBOB, get it? WBOB. It's a good station, yeah. You have to give them something they can receive in that one listen in real time. That doesn't mean it has to be simple or simplistic, but it does mean it has to be discernible. It has to have, your Dan kind of diction, and in my opinion, and on certain levels. And so anyway, back to the writing and completing and editing. There are a million ways to do it, but it's got to be authentic. It's got to, as Michael Bolton once told me, he said, I'm not sure which is more important, a great song or a song that is great for that artist. So if you're writing for yourself, it's got to be something that feels authentic and right and truthful in your throat and coming out of your lips. Again, it has to be the way people speak. It wants to feel conversational, and it's great if you can tell a story. If you don't have, as they say in Nashville, any furniture, and by that they mean things you can see, physicalities, and not necessarily a couch, but red hair with a wave, or anything that places it and people can start to see what you want them to see. It's just so important to get people receiving all five senses. I mean, if you can say, like what's his name did with that song, Bubblegum Tongue, he said. It was who's the guy? A blues guy, tall guy, has dated every female pop star in the history of life.
Tall blues guy.
And I'll think of his name as we go here.
I'm not sure.
Okay, but he's a pop guy who plays blues and has played with
John Mayer.
John Mayer. Thank you. Ding, ding, ding. He talks about the girl's bubblegum tongue. So going back to the five senses, we can all see bubblegum. We can hear the sound of bubblegum. We can taste bubblegum. What's left?
Smell?
But you see where I'm going with it. if she has, we can feel her tongue, and forgive me if I'm becoming too R-rated for your people.
You go for it. It's an example.
But you see what I'm saying? I just think it was a brilliant bubblegum tongue. It's 2 words, but gosh, what all that conjures up. So if your people could find those kind of things, it'll serve them well, rather than just, you make me feel good. Well, how did she do it or he do it? Show us, don't tell us, show us.
What is something about writing lyrics you have found to be true that a lot of other people don't talk about?
Well, I alluded to the fact that you have to sing it the way you say it. So you got to write lyrics that can be sung and sound like English, and stay in the vernacular, as I said, sound like the way people talk this century, not the 1800s. Say your question again, so I want to give you a proper answer, Dan.
What is something about writing lyrics that you have found to be true, but a lot of people don't talk about? Like something you've been carrying around inside of you, that like you're like, oh man, I wish everyone got this, but you know you get it, and you know it's true.
I've said some of them, but the authenticity is huge. If you're making up stuff, it's like, how many, you got to think about the time capsule. I don't know how many in your audience know that concept, but the idea, you get something that you feel is timeless and you put it in a thing for the Martians to find, 100 years from now, or the Earthlings, if we have any left in 100 years. And it should be a thing that people, it's like Beatles records. It should be a thing that people could hear or read then and go, oh yeah, I see what you mean, rather than, oh, that's so 1984. Like if you watch a movie and they're using sin drums, pew, 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 ba, poo, poo, on the soundtrack, then you go, okay, 1984, 5, 6, whatever. And it takes you out of, it's like if you're in the theater and part of the set falls down and you go, oh, I'm just in the Globe Theater. I'm not in that world they were trying to show me. So you want to be authentic and you want to stay in that narrative that you're trying to get across, and you got to believe in it. It can't be insincere. You can be flippant. If that's the mood you're trying to conjure, that's great. But the tone has to be consistent. You can't, like there's a Beatles lyric that's really terrible that John said was terrible. And it was, it's only love. And in the first verse he goes, I get high when I see you go by. My, oh my, just the sight of you makes my, whatever it is, butterflies. Why am I so shy when I'm beside you? It's only love and that is all. Okay, so he's like kind of arm's length and a little scared. And then in the second verse he goes, I got to think what the second verse is now. That's how hard loving you. Is it right that you and I should fight every night? Gee, I thought they were kind of new. And then he says, just the sight of you makes night turn bright, very bright. Haven't I the right to make it up, girl? Bum. It's like, it's such a different tone from the first verse. It's like two different people. It's in a different century. The first one was 20th century, and the second one was 21st. Yeah. And it's like, we didn't bridge, him being shy and barely knowing her to all this angst about, having I the right to make it up. Make up what? What are you talking about? So when the audience is going, say what? Then you've lost them. And because they don't have time to rewind and evaluate like with a poem.
I'd like to circle back to one thing you mentioned and to segment it down a little further. you mentioned the idea of the evergreen song, creating something that's going to be around for a long time. And I think that there's two aspects to that. One is the songwriting itself, and the second is the production. So like the 80s drums, I like to talk about songs as like it's a piece of chocolate. You can put different wrappers around the same piece of chocolate, and the wrapper is the production.
Yeah.
But the quality of the chocolate is always going to be the same, and that's a good song. And a good quality chocolate, you put it in any wrapper, and then obviously putting psychology to the side. If you're wrapping a piece of newspaper, someone thinks it's cheap. All those types of double-blind studies. And again, perhaps I'm going too far down the list of qualifiers for my question here. But could you perhaps delineate between the production side and then the songwriting side within that evergreen concept?
Okay, well, this is a great subject, Dan, because so many people get caught up with this sound of the snare drum, and they'll spend way more time getting the drums sounding good than they will writing the song. And, it goes back to the Quincy Jones take on, the real estate, what matters the most, location, location, location. He was asked, what are the three most important aspects or elements of a hit song, a hit record? And he said, the song, the song, the song. And anybody who doesn't know that needs to hear it again. Listen, go to replay that and take it in because it's real. Another thing we say about songs is you can't polish a turd. So if your song is a turd, you need to go back to rewriting mode. Okay, so put all your work in on the song. If you have a song that you now totally believe passes muster and could be in the time capsule, your job now is to record it the way the Beatles did. Make it for that moment, but don't have it be, flavor of the month sounds and instrumentation, and don't be chasing what you hear on the radio now or heard yesterday or whatever it is. Create something that rises above the moment, that transcends the time that you're recording it. You can acknowledge, you can be aware of. It's good to be aware of, and I'm guilty of not really being current in my music listening. So, don't expect that I'm going to deliver, the next hit record. That was those guys on the wall behind me there, and I've probably earned my last one. But I do think even now that all the Kaylee Rain records will sound good 10, 20, 30 years from now. And I kind of learned this, if you will. There was a TV show when I was a kid in the 60s called The Dick Van Dyke Show. And the Mary Tyler Moore Show was kind of a spin-off from that. But the creators of that show refused to use the slang of the day because they thought if this show gets into syndication and is played years and years from now, we don't want it to clang on people's ears and say, what are they saying? Hip and groovy doggy dog or whatever kind of stuff. And I say stuff like that now knowing that I'm so out of it. But, I'm 70 years old, so forgive me or not, I really couldn't begin to give a if you do or you don't, I'm looking to have fun. So in the years left me, Dan. So, but anyway, make a record that you think will translate across the time continuum.
Would you mind going just one level of detail further on recording it like the Beatles? Just spell that out plainly for people who might not understand what that means.
Excellent. You're very sharp, man. I really give you credit for wanting that kind of detail. All right, so I'm talking about the Beatles. Let's talk about Ringo. A lot of us know the four Beatles, right? Let's talk about Ringo. That the drums have a little punch and are recorded well. and they sound like the way he played it. And we'll get him to play it like himself. So that's kind of it there. And we won't necessarily, we've got the four Beatles. If they want to have orchestrations, they had the world's greatest possible producer for them, a guy named George Martin, who was, arguably the fifth Beatle, if you will. And but he created arrangements that the four Beatles felt were perfect for the song, not the day or the year or the radio format they sought, for the song. If we are slaves to the song, we can't get along. And that's really the case. It's really about the song. We have to serve the song, and if we do so in a way that is transparent, that does not involve a lot of ego, listen to the high notes I can sing, or whatever, that you're trying to make the song sing with the bass and the drums and the guitars and the keyboards and however you do it. If you do that in an authentic way, you're going to be happy when you're Grandpa Bob like me, and looking back and saying, oh, this was good. That one maybe wasn't so great. Yeah. But we got by. And, but in general, the catalog, is comprised of stuff that was legitimately decent and was well recorded and still sits well on most people's ears.
Do you think that there's an argument to be made, looking to recent cases of what I believe will be evergreen songs, particularly some of Ed Sheeran's stuff from a couple years ago, where it really was just drums, bass, guitar, some keyboards, maybe a pad.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I love it. Here you have a terrific song. He's a wonderful singer, has a great vocal timbre. He sings with passion and authenticity. He's not trying to put one over on us with his vocal or his song or his production. And you hit it right on the head. That authenticity is what your people should be looking for. And, people who of whatever age in this moment who are creating for now know a lot more than I do about the last 10 years of repertoire. And use your knowledge of all that, but do it your way.
The point I'm trying to drive at here is the use of the specific instruments. And while I think there's a case to be made in the past 10 years that, different instruments have been made, do you think that there is some sort of established truth, maybe by virtue of history, maybe by virtue of the body of work of guitar, bass, drums, piano? Is there something there past just the body of work, or is it because of the body of work that just works when there's a good song?
Yeah. It's down to the song, always. And many songs are great and at their best with just piano and vocal.
True.
Others that were written on guitar and vocal. I've screwed up many a song by making elaborate demos at the expense of my publisher. And, they might have loved the song when I played it for them in the office, and they might have gone, when they heard the finished demo. Immutable truths is what we're looking for, right? So, a voice and an accompanying instrument, if both delivered well with authenticity, generally can't go wrong. But if you have "If You Think I'm Sexy" that needs the rhythm track, then you got to put it in there, because that and a piano is probably not going to.
That'd be interesting.
Not going to hit it into the 12th row in Yankee Stadium. So
I think there's one thing to talk about too with the authenticity of the art. Also comes an authenticity of living. If you watch interviews with Ed Sheeran, he's him. He's not putting on airs.
Yeah.
He's just being who he is. And I think perhaps there's a big journey we can all go on through music around figuring out who we are and clearing away layers of what is not us to find us.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfectly said. Very little I can add. You got it right. And if you record a song and go to sleep and you wake up the next day and you listen to it and it makes you smile, then you probably did it right. And if you're not smiling, if there's any kind of stomach churning going on, I've had it be one line in a song. I've had it be that I sang something in a way that was too singery, too interested in people hearing how well I can sing. Maybe the bass part is wrong, but there's just something that clangs, and or if you drop a syllable and people can't follow the story, and the story really matters. It's all song by song by song to evaluate how best to render it. But you got to be a slave to the song, but the song's got to be finished. So,
are there any other metrics besides the inner stomach churn or the inner benchmark of excellence that you would recommend for people to find, or do people just need to figure out what their internal benchmark for excellence is?
Yeah, no. Here's the main one, Dan. Take this song that you think is so wonderful and precious and finished, and go out and play it for somebody. If you can, play it at an open mic, or if you have a show or a concert or whatever coming up, play it for people and watch their body language and receive back the information that they're giving you about your song. And if they're looking the other way, if you ask them what they thought about it, so, oh, great, they look to the side. They're trying to be sweet, but they thought it was cool. And playing it for real. And also, as you're playing it live, you're going, oh, man, that's not finished. And you get all the signposts along the way. It's, it could be as simple as I pitched it a half step too high for me to sing it when I'm nervous. Because when you go in front of people, you're going to be more nervous than doing a song. And, so maybe you just didn't really learn the song well enough. Because Randy Newman once said, you have to know a song 10 times as well to play it in front of people as you would to play it in your basement when nobody's around. Because you're going to be anxious, at least, if not nervous or scared. But playing it for people will tell you, A, if you've learned it, and B, if it's any darn good.
How do you think about crafting a melody?
Well, melody's a great word, and it's great that you brought it up, because so many people anymore don't even know what we mean when we say melody. In other words, they'll ponder for a second and say, well, does he mean is a sweet song? And by melody, of course, we mean the bit the guy is singing, right? Those notes are the melody. And sometimes a music critic or a songwriting teacher like myself will say, I don't really hear a melody. And folks will say, well, what do you mean? He's saying, and I'll say, well, okay, that's a melody, but it's just like a 3-note blues riff. And if that's, what you want to hang your hat on as, Mom and Dad, look what I did. Fine, but melody has to have shape, and it has to have a combination, like all great art. It has to have a combination of the familiar and the fresh. And I always use the song Yesterday to teach melody, or to try to teach melody to students. And I'll sing, yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now I need a place to hide away. Oh, I believe in yesterday. So follow me now. There's arithmetic to it. There's shape to it. 2, 1, 1. Bum, bum, ba, da, ba, da. 7, 6, 6. The relationship of 7, 6, 6 is the same as 2, 1, 1. And then 6, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. And then 4, 3, 3 is the same as 2, 1, 1. And 7, 6, 6. So we have a pattern that isn't ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-ba-da, ba-da-da, that isn't the same crap over and over and over again. It reestablishes itself elsewhere, and so there's freshness to it, but there's also a sense of home. We want to feel like we know where home is, but we want to go on a little bit of a journey. Then we want to come back to home so we can relax and enjoy our lives and stuff, and maybe have a margarita. But if there's no journey, there's no adventure to it. But we can only remember it if we see the shapes and if we hear the symmetry. It's like if I tell you my phone number is 444-4444, you can remember that pretty easily. But if I say it's 498-6134, maybe you're quick enough to pick that up. But if I then give you 17 more phone numbers, you're not going to be able to receive them. Our brains crave symmetry and order. So, but they also, our usness craves freshness and journey. So there's so much that can be taught about melody. Almost no one wants to know about it. And it drives me entirely mental. But the Beatles, without having gone to melody school, understood it 100%. And there's so many genius melodies in Beatles songs. And it's a combination of the rhythms and the way they harmonize the melodies, like the song No Reply, where he first goes, I saw the light, then he goes, I saw the light, and then he has this chord, and you're now singing the major seventh, and etc. And just the emotional pull on that, and Ed Sheeran does it. Most great songwriters do it. Well, they'll repeat a melody, but have different chords than you heard the first time, and it's all new context. So it feels like new melody, but it isn't. So it's that combination of the familiar and the fresh. So there's so many ways to do it, but we have to spend a little time and learn some of it. And that's what I've tried to do since I was a teenager, is try to every piece of music I've heard since I'm 17. I've tried to do sort of a mental chart as I listen to it. Go, oh yeah, he's singing that major seventh against that chord, and that's why I cared. That's why it gave me a little bit of tug and pull and emotion and so forth. So,
circle back to something you said. You said a lot of people don't care. I'm paraphrasing you. You said a lot of people don't care or pay attention to melody, and it drives you nuts. Could you dive into that? I think you might have just said it there, but it just a little further, a little deeper on that.
Yeah. Let's say we have two writers. Think about Elton John and Bernie Taupin. The way that would work is Bernie Taupin would write what he meant as a lyric, not a poem, but a lyric, and he would either mail it or fax it or email it or whatever that time period called for to Elton. And Elton, as Bernie would say, sometimes didn't really read it through. He'd just start singing it. But you want to make the words come alive. And there's a marriage between the words and the melody that has to be, one that's going to reach its 50th anniversary of its wedding, as my wife and I hope to do 2 years from October, which ain't bad for the record business.
Well, come back and watch us in 2 years. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So, melody, it's got to stand that test of time. That thing that I talked about with the time capsule. Not only are you rising above the fashion of the day, but are you fashioning a melody, a way of singing that lyric that turns it into English that anybody cares about. And I'm just going to reach over here, if you'll pardon me. We recently were officiants at the wedding of the bass player in Kaylee Rain, which was quite a challenge. But I'm just going to read this. Here's this. This is a page from kind of the wedding officiant's manual, and I'm just going to sing it to us. Okay? Pronouncing a couple officially wed is exciting, but recall that your most important legal duty as an officiant actually comes after the vows are exchanged. So I'm trying to sing it so that people would go, oh, I get it. I've just taken in the meaning of, so that's, so I'm started when I was 15, so that's 55 years of songcraft, in a 17-second rendition. And I could do it a few different ways, but they would all sound like it reads or should read. Okay? So, but that's the initial hat on backwards puking out of it, Dan. And then I would want to go back and I would notice where it's just kind of drifting maybe, and I was just riffing, and some of that might be workable, but I want to go back and say, well, can I remember this? There was that guy from Wham, George Michael, who sadly has passed away, but he would work on a song and he would never record it. And his philosophy was, if I wake up tomorrow and I can't remember it, it wasn't worth writing. So that's a very narrow and strict interpretation of it must be memorable. But it holds, and they had some, and he, as a solo artist, had some really big records because you really could take in those melodies in one listen and remember them. So, I don't know, I'm sort of talking around the subject here.
Well, I want to point out a couple things that just happened. Number one is, even in your interpretation of the melody, it was not just the melody. It was, you were painting the emotions with the melody. You were also using dynamics. You were using articulation. You were using all sorts of layers of different concepts put on top of each other. And I think it's so important for people to understand that you can go the route of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and you can spend 5-10 years of your life just listening to music to understand those frameworks. Or you can read a book and do it in like a week. And it's like, choice is yours. Like, because
I like that. So are we promoting your book right in this moment?
No, I'm just making a point that it's like the songcraft that you're talking about, even the process of going through all the songs you're talking about, making this mental framework, you have the ear training to even express terms like saying it's a major seventh above the chord. And then even Elton John talks about going into classical music for writing his melodies. And even taking the idea of the 2-1-1 from yesterday, we could frame that. Yeah. And again, it's just about having mental frameworks that make it go faster. It's like you could think of that as being a motif. And then you're moving that motif around. And then you look at Beethoven, and Beethoven's doing it. And it's like...
You got it, man. You said it exactly right and better than I did. Absolutely.
Well, I don't think I said it better than you did. I think I had the pleasure of having you go through it once and hat backwards it, and then I got to hat forwards it while you were doing it.
Nice. No, great job. And I will say to whomever is listening or watching or whatever you do on these, what's it called? A podcast?
Yeah.
That this guy Dan, to whom I am speaking, are you the party to whom I am speaking?
I hope so.
That's an old laugh-in joke, but anyway, Dan knows his stuff, and I hope you're not too embarrassed by that compliment. But I'm very impressed by the handle you have on how to teach people how to look at things the right way.
I really appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to me because it was a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously.
My Kaylee reign is the way that I think about teaching to people, and that's the greatest honor of my life, is to be able to translate that to people. Yeah.
Amen. Well, probably know this phrase about teachers. They don't care what you know. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Right? So until you really care about your student or person you're coaching or whatever it is, receiving the message, and if you really care about that person and value their essence, they're just going to feel taught at, and they're not going to sense the conversation that you ideally want to get going. So you got it, man. So more power to you. I bow to
Bob,
you.
Power to you. I think what you're saying is so true in all aspects of life. It's true for every relationship you could ever have with anyone. You need to be there 100% for the other person. And it's the ultimate act of empathy and selflessness, but it's also the ultimate act of selfishness, because you will never feel better than when you are there 100% for someone. You will feel amazing. Yeah. And so it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship when you're all in, in on someone.
Amen. You're not only smart, you're a good guy. You aspire to good things. And I'm going to stop complimenting you now because you're going to go crazy nuts on me.
Considering the vein of questions I've been coming to you with today, what should I have asked you, or what outstanding things do you think there still are that I could have asked you, that if you were in my position, you would have asked you?
And now I'm going to pay this fella Dan, down the end of my finger here, the ultimate compliment and say that I think you as a teacher, and teachers are listeners, not just talkers. You've got it as figured out as anything I could now tell you or your audience. And so I really encourage people to view this Dan-ness on this Best Music podcast as golden. I mean, I've got golden records, but he's got golden teaching. And because he gives a darn. And he's put in all the time to learn about Beethoven and Bach and motifs and generosity. Generosity is a huge thing. If we're not writing and recording and performing music as an act of generosity, man, you're cheating yourself, and boy, oh boy, are you cheating your audience. We as performers, writers, producers, whatever it is that we have to come to serve. We have to have a servant's heart. And I'm not being a religionist here. I'm being maybe a little spiritualist, but I believe that's where we get the essence of what an artist really is. Somebody who has something to say that the world needs to hear. And the world may or may not know that, but once they receive it, good things will have happened. So that's my final speech, Dan. No more speeches.
May I ask one follow-up question to that speech?
Yes, please.
What do you think a solid action step would be for someone to go about? Because cultivating that level of gratitude of life and that level of generosity of giving, if it's not innate to a personality or a person, is not an evident thing to do. What is one action step that has helped you get closer to that you would like to share?
All right. So there are two questions. I just learned this like 2 weeks ago, but I think it's fab. There are two questions that you want to answer. Do I have joy in my life? Okay, so ponder that and give yourself your answer. Next question. Have I brought joy to other people's lives? And you can't really know the answer to that, because you could ask people and they'll say what they think you want to hear. But you know in your heart of hearts whether you've at least tried to do that. And if you've really tried to do that, and you try to do that every darn day, either because you're trying to check it off on your day timer or whatever it is, or because it becomes who you are, because you've done it every day for however many years, that's all we can do. So that's what I would say. Do I have joy in my life, and have I brought that joy to other people, or brought out the joy in other people? The word education, educe, to lead out of. It's not to cram facts in, it's to bring out who Karen is, or who Riley is, or who Marcus is, whatever. And Dan, I think you know that, and I can picture you're wicked good at it. So keep that up, and everybody tune in and turn on, baby.
I would add one thing there, and that is to ask of oneself the question, how can I bring joy into other people's lives? And then, good. To make it an action. So you say, have I had joy in my life? And then ask, the next question is, how can I bring joy into other people's lives? Because by asking that question, you yourself will come up with answers that may surprise, shock, and delight you and everyone in your life.
Perfect. I love hanging out with people who are smarter than I am, and I have just done that for the last 62 minutes.
Well, Bob, thank you for being so incredibly generous with your time. You said half an hour. You went double with me. So thank you so very much. And on behalf of everyone who you will help and profoundly change the course of their life, and to whom you will bring joy through the wisdom and knowledge you have shared here today, thank you so very much.
Amen. God bless you, buddy. Thank you.